The little Nebula nursery station had survived meteor strikes, power failures, and that one incident with the combustible slime molds. What it had not survived, what it was currently, spectacularly failing to survive, was nap time with 3 Narlith cubs. Leela stood in the observation corridor, watching through reinforced transparent aluminum, as what could only be described as a small-scale natural disaster unfolded in Playroom C. She'd taken this job 6 months ago thinking, how hard could alien daycare be? Children were children, right? Feed them, play with them, make sure they didn't kill each other, collect paycheck. Simple. Yeah, simple. The universe, as it turned out, had a wicked sense of humor. "They've breached the 3rd containment field," Olmara announced, her 4 arms gesturing wildly at the monitors. The Killmoth instructor looked like she hadn't slept in days, her usually pristine silver fur standing up in stress-induced tufts. "3rd one, in 2 hours. Do you understand what I'm saying? They're not even trying to be subtle about it anymore. They're just demolishing everything we put in front of them." Lila watched as one of the cubs, Prowlkit, she'd learned to identify them by their bioluminescent markings, scaled the wall with the casual ease of something that had never heard the word gravity and wouldn't respect it if it had. His scales gleamed an aggressive orange, 6 limbs finding purchase on surfaces that looked perfectly smooth to human eyes. Behind him, his brother Snapjaw was attempting to fit his entire head into the nutrient dispenser, probably trying to figure out if he could reprogram it to dispense something more interesting than the approved dietary supplements. The 3rd cub, Talonpip, the runt of the litter, sat in the corner methodically shredding what had once been an educational poster about sharing. His claws made short work of the supposedly indestructible material. "They're really committed to the chaos," Lila observed. Olmara turned all 4 of her eyes on Lila. Committed. Committed. They're 3 cycles old, and they've managed to terrify every other species' children into hiding. The Polthan twins are in the supply closet. The Vrixenal child won't stop crying. And somehow, Prowlkit figured out how to disable the magnetic locks. He's 3 cycles old. I've been working with children for 20 seasons, and I've never—" She stopped, pressing one hand to her forehead in what Lila recognized as the universal gesture of a caretaker at the end of their rope. "Where are the other staff?" "Called in sick, all of them, simultaneously." Olmara's laugh had a slightly unhinged quality. "Food poisoning," they said. "All 3 of them. What are the odds?" "Pretty good when you're scheduled to work with apex predators who think nap time is a suggestion." Through the glass, Prowlkit had reached the ceiling and was hanging upside down, his tail, thick and muscular despite his age, wrapped around an overhead beam. He made a chattering sound that Lila had learned meant he was pleased with himself. Snapjaw abandoned the nutrient dispenser and started climbing up to join his brother. "The station director is threatening to revoke our interspecies license," Olmara said quietly. "If we can't handle 3 cubs, how can we claim to provide adequate care for any species? We'll lose funding. The whole station might shut down." Lila had heard this threat twice already today. It was starting to lose its impact, but she could see the genuine distress in Olmara's posture, the way her secondary arms kept clenching and unclenching. "What did their parents say when you contacted them?" "Oh, the parents were very understanding, very apologetic. They assured me their children are perfectly socialized. They said, and I'm quoting here, they're just spirited. Spirited. As if that explains the structural damage." Olmara pulled up a report on her datapad. 2 containment fields, 1 observation window, which they didn't break so much as convince it to break itself. the self-esteem of 3 caregivers, and it's only midday. The window convinced itself? I don't want to talk about the window. In the playroom, Talonpip had finished with the poster and was now investigating the door panel. His small claws traced the edges with curious precision, head tilted in concentration. For a species classified as apex predators from a Class 9 death world, the Narlith cubs were oddly adorable, when they weren't being absolutely terrifying. They looked like someone had taken the basic concept of a reptile, added 2 extra limbs, made them bioluminescent, and then gave them the personality of caffeinated squirrels with opposable thumbs. Their scales shifted colors based on mood. Their eyes could track movement independently like chameleons, and their tails could grip with enough strength to support their full body weight. Oh, and the teeth. Rows and rows of very sharp, very efficient teeth. The parents can't pick them up until tonight, Olmara continued. Station rotation puts them on shift for another 8 hours. We're supposed to keep the cubs calm, engaged, and, this is the critical part, we're supposed to get them to take their mandatory rest period. Do you know what happens if we don't? Do you know what 3 overtired Narlith cubs are capable of? I'm guessing it's not good. It's catastrophic. They get aggressive. Not play aggressive. Actually, aggressive. They'll start seeing everything as prey, including us. Olmara's voice dropped. I've already filed the incident reports. I've already documented our attempts. If something goes wrong, if someone gets hurt because we couldn't manage this, it'll be on record that we tried everything. She sounded defeated. Leela had never heard Olmara sound defeated. The Killmoth was usually unflappable, the kind of person who could referee a fight between rival species children while simultaneously conducting a parent conference and ordering supplies. But right now, she looked like she was ready to quit, move to a quiet asteroid somewhere, and never look at another child again. Lila turned back to the window. Prowlkit and Snapjaw were now both on the ceiling, apparently having a contest to see who could hang the longest without falling. Talonpip had given up on the door panel and was dragging a cushion twice his size across the room, determined to build something. Fort, nest, monument to chaos. Who knew? What if I tried? Olmara blinked all 4 eyes in sequence. What? Let me go in there. Let me try to handle them. Lila, no, absolutely not. You're human. Your species is, no offense, structurally fragile compared to Narlith. One swipe from those claws and you'd need medical attention. One bite and you could lose a limb. These aren't domesticated animals. They're children, yes, but they're children from a species that hunts in packs and can take down prey 3 times their size. The liability alone, I know the risks. Do you? Do you really? Olmara moved closer, lowering her voice. 3 other caregivers tried already. All of them trained in interspecies interaction. All of them with more experience than you. They couldn't do it. What makes you think you can? It was a fair question. Lila didn't have a good answer, just a gut feeling and a growing suspicion that everyone had been going about this the wrong way. She'd been watching the cubs for the past hour, really watching them, and she'd noticed something the others had probably missed because they were too busy panicking or trying to implement proper protocol. The cubs weren't acting out because they were malicious. They were bored, understimulated. They kept testing boundaries because nobody had set any that made sense to them. And every time an adult showed fear, they pushed harder because they were predators. And predators could smell fear like humans could smell coffee brewing. Let me try, Lila repeated. Worst case scenario, I failed just like everyone else, and we're back where we started. Best case, I figure something out. Best case. You don't get mauled. That too. Ulmara studied her for a long moment, all four eyes focusing with uncomfortable intensity. Whatever she saw there must have convinced her, because she sighed and gestured toward the entry panel. Fine, but I'm keeping the emergency response team on standby. And when, you need to exit quickly, just hit your comm. We'll flood the room with sedative gas. It's our last resort, and the parents will be furious, but better furious parents than a dead human. Always looking on the bright side, Ulmara. Someone has to. Layla approached the entry panel, pressing her palm against the reader. The door slid open with a soft hiss, and she stepped through into the staging area. Through the next door, she could hear the cubs, chattering, clicking, the occasional thump of something, hitting a wall. She took a deep breath. Then another. Fear was natural. Fear was sensible. But she couldn't let them smell it on her, couldn't let it show in her body language. Predators, she'd learned in her research, respected confidence. Not aggression, not dominance, just calm, assured confidence. You're either very brave or very stupid, Ulmara's voice crackled through the comm in her ear. Can't it be both? Knowing you? Probably. Leela unsealed the inner door and stepped into Playroom C. 3 pairs of eyes swiveled toward her immediately. The chattering stopped. The thumping stopped. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Prowlkit hung from the ceiling, his scales shifting from orange to a curious yellow-green. Snapjaw crouched on an overturned table, head lowered, watching. Talonpip abandoned his cushion fort and sat up straight, his smaller frame tense with attention. They were sniffing the air. She could see their nostrils flaring, heads making small movements as they processed her scent, cataloging her, deciding if she was threat, prey, or something else entirely. Lila stood still, keeping her breathing even, her posture relaxed but not submissive. She'd worn her oldest station jacket today, the one that had been through enough wash cycles that it was soft and familiar. It smelled like her, like human, like the station's recycled air and the weird detergent they used in the communal laundry. She made no sudden movements, just waited. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 30 seconds, Prowlkit made a decision. He dropped from the ceiling, landing with surprising grace for something that weighed maybe 20 pounds. He took 3 steps toward her, then stopped, watching. She still didn't move. Snapjaw jumped down from the table, landing beside his brother. 2 against 1 now, pack formation, but they weren't showing aggression. Not yet, just intense, predatory curiosity. Talonpip stayed where he was, the runt keeping his distance while his brothers investigated. Well, Lila said quietly, her voice calm, you 3 certainly know how to make an impression. Prowlkit's head tilted. His scales rippled through colors, yellow to blue to back to yellow. He took another step closer, near enough now that she could see the individual scales, the way his eyes tracked her every breath. And then he did something she didn't expect. He sat down, just plopped his rear end on the floor, tail curling around his feet, and looked up at her with an expression that could only be described as expectant. Snapjaw, not to be outdone, did the same. Behind them, Talonpip chirped once, a questioning sound. Lila almost laughed. Here she was, prepared for battle, for chaos, for having to dodge and weave and prove herself, and the cubs just sat down, like they were waiting for story time. Okay then, she said, and slowly, carefully, she sat down too, right there on the floor, legs crossed, hands in her lap. Non-threatening, accessible, at their level. All three cubs stared at her. "So," Lila continued, keeping her voice conversational, "I hear you guys don't like nap time." Prowlkit made a sound that might have been agreement or might have been indigestion. Hard to tell. "Yeah, I get it. Naps are boring. You've got energy to burn, places to climb, things to destroy. Why would you want to sleep when there's so much chaos to cause?" She paused, watching their reactions. They were listening, actually listening, even if they couldn't understand most of her words. Tone mattered more than content. But here's the thing. You know what happens when apex predators don't rest? They get sloppy, miss the hunt, make mistakes. Snapjaw's ears, small, barely visible against his skull, twitched forward. "Your parents are hunters, right? Huntmaster and pack leader? Big important titles. Think they got those by skipping naps? No way. They got those by being smart, being strong, and being well-rested." It was absolutely ridiculous, giving a motivational speech to three alien toddlers who probably understood about 10% of what she was saying. But it was working. They were engaged, focused on her rather than on finding new and creative ways to dismantle the room. And that's when Lila had her first real idea. A terrible idea. A brilliant idea. The kind of idea that would either solve everything or get her fired. She started to unzip her jacket. "Lila, what are you doing?" Ulmara's voice hissed in her ear. "Trust me," Lila whispered back, knowing the cubs could probably hear anyway. She pulled off her jacket slowly, no sudden movements, and set it on the floor beside her. The station's climate control kept everything at a comfortable temperature, so her standard-issue shirt was fine. But the jacket was important. All three cubs immediately focused on it. Prowlkit leaned forward, sniffing audibly. Snapjaw's tail swished once, twice. Even Talonpip stood up from his corner, taking a few tentative steps closer. The jacket smelled like her, strongly. It was practically soaked in her scent after months of wear. And to species that relied heavily on scent for pack identification, for territory marking, for communication, that meant something. Lila left the jacket where it was and stood up, slowly, watching the cubs watch her. Then she took 3 steps backward, giving them space, and said the magic words that would either make her a genius or an idiot. "Who wants to play a game?" Prowlkit's scales flashed bright orange. Excitement, Lila had learned, and he launched himself toward her with the enthusiasm of a missile with legs. She'd been ready for it, stepping aside at the last second, letting his momentum carry him past her. He skidded on the smooth floor, claws scrabbling for purchase, and spun around to face her again. His expression, if a reptilian predator could have expressions, looked absolutely delighted. Snapjaw joined in immediately, circling around to her left, while Prowlkit took the right. Classic pack tactics, even at 3 cycles old. They were trying to flank her, cut off escape routes, work together to corner prey. Except Lila wasn't running. Not yet. "Lila, this is insane," Ulmara's voice crackled in her ear, higher-pitched than usual. "You're triggering their hunting instincts. This is exactly what we've been trying to avoid." "No," Lila said, keeping her eyes on the cubs, watching their body language. "Everyone else has been trying to suppress their hunting instincts. That's different. These are predators. You can't just tell them not to be what they are." She dropped into a crouch, making herself smaller, less threatening, but also more interesting. Both cubs froze, reassessing. Then she did something that probably violated every safety protocol in the station handbook. She ran, not away from them. That would have been the sensible thing, the human survival instinct thing. No, she ran parallel to the wall, fast enough to be interesting, slow enough that they could absolutely catch her if they tried. She was bait on purpose, prey that wanted to be chased. And oh, did they chase. Prowlkit let out a sound that was half chirp, half growl, pure predatory joy, and took off after her. Snapjaw followed, the two of them moving with coordination that was impressive for their age. Their claws clicked against the floor, tails streaming behind them for balance, 6 limbs giving them speed and agility that made Lila's 2-legged sprint look clumsy by comparison. She made it maybe 10 feet before Prowlkit caught her, launching himself at her legs with perfect tackle form. She went down, carefully, controlled, protecting her head, and rolled onto her back. Both cubs pounced immediately, pinning her arms with surprising strength for something that weighed less than a house cat. They weren't hurting her. Their claws were retracted, their teeth nowhere near her skin. This was play, not attack. The difference was subtle but critical. "Got me," Lila said, breathing hard, smiling up at them. "Good hunt." Prowlkit chirped triumphantly and released her arm, stepping back like he was waiting for round 2. Snapjaw took longer to let go, sniffing at her shoulder, her neck, clearly fascinated by the human scent up close. Then something small and determined barreled into the pile, and Lila found herself with 3 cubs instead of 2. Talonpip had apparently decided this looked too fun to miss. Runt status, be damned. He climbed over his brothers to reach Lila, his smaller frame struggling to find space, and pressed his snout against her hand. Her heart did something complicated in her chest. This tiny predator, who'd been keeping his distance, who'd watched from the sidelines while his bigger brothers tested boundaries, had just made the choice to trust her, to join in, to be part of the pack activity. "Hey there, little guy," she said softly, and Talonpip's scale shifted to a soft blue. Content. Curious. "I cannot believe. This is working," Olmara muttered through the comm. "I've got the entire observation deck watching this. Nobody can believe this is working." "Predators need to hunt," Lila said, sitting up carefully, cubs still crawling over her. "You can't take that away. You just have to redirect it. Channel it into something that doesn't involve property damage." She got to her feet, 3 cubs circling her now like satellites around a planet. "Okay, round 2. But this time, you have to catch me before I reach that corner." She pointed across the room. "Think you can do it?" All 3 of them dropped into hunting crouches simultaneously. Even Talonpip, mimicking his brothers, tail low, eyes focused. "Ready?" Lila tensed. "Go!" She sprinted. They chased. This time she made it further, zigzagging around overturned furniture, using obstacles they'd created during their earlier rampage. The cubs adapted instantly, splitting up, taking different routes, trying to predict where she'd go next. Snapjaw cut her off, emerging from behind a toppled storage unit. She pivoted, changed direction, and nearly made it to the corner before Prowlkit came down from above. He'd climbed the wall again, flanked her from an angle she hadn't expected, and caught her shirt. She stopped, hands up in surrender. Okay, you win. Too fast for me." They were panting now, all 3 of them, tongues lolling slightly. Good. Tired cubs were the goal. Exhausted cubs were even better. She played with them for another 20 minutes, varying the games, keeping them engaged. Sometimes she was the prey, sometimes she hid objects and made them hunt by scent. Sometimes she had them race each other while she judged. Through it all, she noticed something the other caregivers had probably missed. The cubs kept returning to her jacket. Between games, they'd circle back to where it lay on the floor, sniffing it, occasionally touching it with their snouts or tails. Prowlkit even sat on it once, briefly, before Snapjaw shoved him off to claim the spot himself. They liked it. More than liked it. They were drawn to it. Pack animals, she remembered from her research, often used scent marking to identify safe spaces, safe individuals. Den sites smelled like pack. And her jacket, saturated with her human scent, was registering as something significant to these three tiny predators. Which meant, maybe, just maybe, she had the solution to the naptime problem. But first, someone needed a bandage. It happened during what Lila had mentally dubbed Hunt the Rolling Ball, which was exactly what it sounded like. She'd found a sphere-shaped toy in the corner, miraculously unshredded, and was rolling it across the room while the cubs chased it with the intensity of, well, predators chasing prey. Talonpip, determined to prove himself as capable as his larger brothers, launched himself at the ball mid-roll. His trajectory was perfect. His landing was not. He came down hard on his right forelimb, the one that was slightly shorter than the others, and the yelp he made was pure pain. Everything stopped. Prowlkit and Snapjaw froze mid-chase, heads swiveling toward their brother. Their scales flashed red. Alarm, Lila had learned, or aggression, depending on context. Talonpip sat there, holding his injured limb off the ground, making small, distressed sounds that tugged at something deep in Lila's chest. She moved without thinking, crossing the distance between them in 3 long strides. "Hey, hey, let me see," she said, dropping to her knees beside the cub. She reached for his injured limb slowly, giving him time to pull away if he wanted. He didn't pull away. He leaned into her touch, still making those awful whimpering sounds. Behind her, she was aware of Prowlkit and Snapjaw approaching. Not in play mode anymore. Their movements were cautious, deliberate, protective. She could feel their eyes on her, watching what she did with their packmate, their brother. One wrong move, and she'd have 2 very upset predator cubs to deal with. "It's okay," Lila murmured, examining the limb gently. "Nothing broken, thank goodness. Just a scrape, some abraded scales, maybe a bruise forming underneath. Painful, but not serious. You're okay, tough guy. Just a little scratch." She looked around the room, spotted her jacket still lying where she'd left it, and made a decision that was either brilliant or completely ridiculous. Probably both. She scooted over to the jacket, Talonpip still cradled against her side, and used one hand to tear a strip from the bottom hem. "Olmara's going to kill me for destroying station property," she muttered. "I'll allow it," Olmara's voice crackled back, tension evident even through the calm. "Just keep doing whatever you're doing. Those 2 look ready to attack anything that moves wrong." She wasn't wrong. Prowlkit had positioned himself between Lila and the door, scales still flashing warning red. Snapjaw paced nearby, agitated, watching his brother with what could only be concern. Lila wrapped the fabric strip around Talonpip's injured limb, gentle but firm, the way she'd learned in basic first aid. The material smelled strongly of her, months of wear concentrated in soft cotton fibers. As she tied it off, Talonpip pressed his snout against her hand, scales shifting from distressed yellow to a calmer blue. "There you go. All better. Well, not all better, but better enough." She stroked his head ridge carefully, and he leaned into it, eyes half closing. And that's when something changed. Prowlkit's scales shifted from red to blue, the tension draining from his posture. He approached slowly, sniffing at his brother, at the makeshift bandage, at Lila's hands. Then he did something that made Lila's breath catch. He pressed his head against her shoulder and made a soft, rumbling sound deep in his chest. Snapjaw followed suit moments later, the two larger cubs flanking her, Talonpip still in her lap. They were surrounding her, but it wasn't aggressive. It was protective, reciprocal. She'd protected their packmate, shown care rather than fear, and they were responding in kind. Pack behavior, Lila breathed. They think I'm pack. That's impossible, Olmara said, but she didn't sound convinced. Narlith don't accept other species as pack. It's unheard of. Tell that to them. The cubs stayed close for another few minutes, a pile of scales and limbs and warmth. Talonpip's whimpering had stopped completely. He seemed perfectly content to sit there, bandaged limb held carefully, surrounded by his brothers and the strange human who smelled like safety. And that's when Lila knew exactly how to solve the nap time problem. She stood up carefully, cubs parting to let her move, and retrieved what remained of her jacket. The tear at the bottom didn't matter. The jacket had just become the most important piece of equipment in this entire nursery. She walked across the room to the designated nap area, a cushioned corner with soft padding, carefully designed for comfort and safety, completely ignored by 3 destructive cubs for the past 2 days. She laid the jacket down in the center of the cushions, smoothing it out so her scent would transfer to the surrounding area. 3 pairs of eyes tracked her movements with laser focus. "Okay," she said, sitting down cross-legged next to the jacket. "Story time. Come here." They came. Not immediately, not without suspicion, but they came. Prowlkit first, because he was always first, the boldest of the 3. He sniffed the jacket extensively, walking around it, examining it from every angle like it might suddenly sprout teeth. "You know what this is?" Lila asked conversationally. "This is what humans use to stay warm, to feel safe. It carries our scent, marks us as belonging to certain groups." She was making this up as she went, half-remembered anthropology mixed with pure instinct, but the cubs were listening. "Your people do something similar, right? Narlith packs. You sleep in piles, keep each other warm, share scents so you know who's family." Snapjaw had joined his brother now, nosing at the jacket, at the spot where she'd torn the strip for Talonpip's bandage. The fresh tear amplified her scent, made it impossible to ignore. "I bet your homeworld gets cold at night," Lila continued, pitching her voice low and soothing. "I read about it. Narlith Prime, hot days, freezing nights. The young cubs sleep in the den while the adults hunt. They pile together for warmth, for protection. The den smells like pack, like safety, like home." Talonpip had wandered over, moving carefully on 3 limbs, the 4th still held slightly off the ground. He climbed right onto the jacket without hesitation, curling up in the center like he owned it. The bandage on his limb pressed against the fabric, scent mixing with scent. "That's right," Lila said softly. "That's exactly right." Prowlkit watched his brother for a long moment. Then, in a move that surprised absolutely no one who'd spent any time with him, he marched over and flopped down on top of Talonpip. Not aggressively, just claiming his spot, asserting that if this was where they were sleeping, he was sleeping on top of the pile because he was the biggest, and that's how it worked. Talonpip made a muffled chirp of protest but didn't move. Snapjaw circled once, twice, 3 times, the way dogs do before settling. Then he wedged himself between his brothers, scales touching scales, tails intertwining, until all 3 cubs were a single mass of contentment on top of Lila's jacket. The room fell silent. Absolutely, perfectly silent. Lila barely dared to breathe. She sat there, hand still extended toward them, watching as 3 sets of eyes slowly drifted closed. Prowlkit's scales faded from active orange to sleepy purple. Snapjaw's breathing deepened, slowed. Talonpip, exhausted from pain and play and excitement, was already asleep, tiny snores emerging from his snout. "Oh, my—" Ulmara's voice cut off abruptly, like she'd forgotten how to finish the sentence. "They're sleeping. They're actually sleeping. Lila, they're sleeping." "Yeah," Lila whispered back. "They are. On your jacket." "Yep. Your scent-soaked, human-smell-saturated jacket. That's the one. This is— I need to document this. I need to call the behavioral specialists. I need to—" Ulmara sounded like she was crying and laughing simultaneously. "You did it. You actually did it." Lila let herself lean back against the wall, careful not to make any noise that might disturb the sleeping cubs. Her heart was pounding, adrenaline from the past hour finally catching up with her. Her shirt was damp with sweat, her muscles ached from being tackled repeatedly by enthusiastic predators, and she was pretty sure she'd have bruises tomorrow from Prowlkit's over-enthusiastic pouncing. And she felt absolutely, ridiculously triumphant. "How long do Narlith cubs usually nap?" she asked quietly. 2 to 3 hours, if they feel safe enough to enter deep sleep. Then I guess I'm sitting here for 2 to 3 hours. I'll have someone bring you water, and food, and probably a medal. Ulmara paused. "Lila, what you just did, getting apex predator cubs to trust you enough to sleep in your presence, that's not just impressive. That's unprecedented. I've been in interspecies childcare for 20 seasons, and I've never seen anything like it." Lila looked at the pile of sleeping cubs, at her jacket barely visible underneath them, at Talonpip's bandaged limb twitching slightly in sleep. "They just needed someone who wasn't afraid of them," she said. "Someone who saw them as what they are, kids, instead of just seeing the teeth and claws. Most species can't get past the teeth and claws." "Yeah, well," Lila smiled, watching Snapjaw's tail curl tighter around his brother's. "Humans are weird like that." The cubs slept for 3 hours and 47 minutes. Lila knew because she counted every single minute, afraid to move, afraid to breathe too loudly, afraid to do anything that might wake them and break whatever spell she'd accidentally cast. Ulmara brought water through a service hatch, passing it through with the reverence of someone delivering sacred relics. The other staff members, the ones who'd mysteriously contracted simultaneous food poisoning, appeared at the observation window around hour 2, looking sheepish and amazed in equal measure. When the cubs finally woke, they did so gradually. Talonpip first, blinking sleepy eyes and yawning wide enough to display all those impressive teeth. Then Snapjaw, who stretched each limb individually like a cat, scales rippling through a lazy rainbow of colors. Prowlkit was last, of course, because the biggest had to make an entrance even when waking from a nap. They looked at Lila like they were surprised to find her still there, like they'd expected her to disappear while they slept, the way all the other caregivers had eventually fled or given up. But she hadn't left. She'd sat there the entire time, guardian of their impromptu den, keeper of the jacket that smelled like pack. Prowlkit climbed off the pile first, shaking himself thoroughly, and walked directly to Lila. He bumped his head against her knee, gently, carefully, nothing like the tackle hugs from earlier, and made a questioning chirp. "Yeah, I'm still here," she said, scratching behind his head ridge the way she'd seen him lean into before. "Not going anywhere." The door chimed. All 3 cubs' heads swiveled toward it, scales flashing alert yellow, bodies tensing for potential threat. Lila felt her own muscles tighten in response. After 3 hours of sitting still, standing up was going to be interesting. Through the door came two Narlith adults, and Lila understood immediately where the cubs got their presents from. The parents were massive, easily 7 feet tall when upright, their scales a deep, mature blue-black that spoke of age and experience. The male had scars along his shoulder ridge, old marks that had healed silver. The female's claws looked like they could shred reinforced steel, probably because they could. Huntmaster and pack leader, she remembered. The titles fit. Both adults stopped just inside the door, taking in the scene. Their 3 cubs, alert but calm, circling a human who was still sitting on the floor like she owned the place. The torn jacket underneath where they'd been sleeping. The makeshift bandage on Talonpip's limb that smelled distinctly human. The female, pack leader, made a sound deep in her chest that could have been a purr or a growl. Lila couldn't tell which, and that was mildly terrifying. "You are the human caretaker," pack leader said. Her voice was deeper than Lila expected, with a clicking undertone that suggested vocal cords not designed for standard. Lila. "Yes, ma'am." Lila started to stand, winced at her protesting muscles, and made it upright through sheer determination. 3 hours of sitting cross-legged on a floor had not been kind to her human joints. "You smell like my children." That was definitely not a question. Lila glanced down at herself, shirt rumpled, definitely showing signs of being used as a climbing structure, probably saturated with cub scent from hours of close contact. "They're very affectionate," she said carefully. Huntmaster moved closer, and Lila had to actively stop herself from backing up. He leaned down, way down, because she was very short compared to adult Narlith, and sniffed at her shoulder, at her hair, at the general humanness of her. "Our cubs attacked 3 other caregivers," he said, straightening up. "Sent them running. Destroyed 2 rooms. The station director called us 4 times today. 4 times. His scales shifted toward red, displeasure clear. "We were told our children were unmanageable, dangerous, a liability." "They're 3 cycles old," Lila said before she could stop herself. "They're supposed to be energetic. They're apex predators from a Class 9 world. What did everyone expect? That they'd sit quietly and color inside the lines?" Both adults stared at her. The room got very quiet. Even the cubs stopped moving, watching the exchange with sudden intensity. Lila realized she'd just snapped at 2 fully grown Narlith hunters, either of whom could probably tear her apart without breaking a sweat. Her brain finally caught up with her mouth. I apologize if that was inappropriate. They're good kids. They just needed someone who was not afraid," pack leader finished softly. She looked at her cubs, at the way they'd positioned themselves around Lila in a loose protective formation, at the jacket on the floor, thoroughly claimed and scent-marked, at Talonpip's bandage. Someone who understood. "The injury?" Huntmaster asked, gesturing toward Talonpip. "Minor scrape during play. Nothing serious. He was very brave about it." Lila watched Talonpip puff up slightly at the praise, scales brightening. "And the bandage material?" "My jacket. It was the cleanest fabric available. And I thought—" She hesitated, unsure how to explain the instinct that had driven her decision. "I thought the scent might be comforting. Pack adjacent, maybe. I'm sorry if that was presumptuous." Pack leader made that sound again, the purr growl that Lila still couldn't interpret. She moved closer, and Lila held very still as the adult Narlith bent down to examine her youngest cub. Talonpip chirped happily, showing off his bandage like it was a trophy, and his mother's scales shifted to a warm purple. Affection, Lila had learned from watching the cubs. "You wrapped it correctly," pack leader said. Applied the right pressure. Used fabric that would not restrict movement. She straightened, fixing Lila with an intense stare. You have medical training? Basic first aid, standard for all station personnel. But you chose to use your own garment rather than request proper medical supplies. The cubs were upset. I didn't want to leave them or wait for supplies to arrive. And I thought, how did she explain this without sounding insane? I thought it might help them feel safer, to have something that smelled familiar nearby. Familiar, Huntmaster repeated. You had been working with them for less than 2 hours. Yes, but we'd been playing. Chase games, hunt the ball, that sort of thing. They'd been close enough to learn my scent, and I'd been sitting with my jacket for... Lila stopped, realizing how this must sound. This is going to come out wrong, but I was trying to simulate den behavior. Make them feel secure enough to sleep. The jacket was the closest thing I had to proper nesting material. Both adults were staring at her now. Not aggressive, not hostile, just staring, evaluating, processing what this small human had just admitted to doing with their children. You studied Narlith pack dynamics, pack leader said slowly. I read everything I could find after I took this job. Wanted to be prepared for all species. Lila shrugged, trying to appear casual despite her racing heart. Your people's culture is fascinating. The pack structures, the hunting strategies, the way you raise your young communally. It's beautiful, actually. The emphasis on family and loyalty. Prowlkit chose that moment to walk over to his mother and butt his head against her leg. He chirped something in what Lila assumed was the Narlith language, clicks and growls and sounds her human throat could never produce, and gestured back toward Lila with his tail. Pack leader responded in kind, a brief exchange that ended with Prowlkit looking smug and Snapjaw joining in with his own commentary. Talonpip climbed onto Huntmaster's foot, demanding attention, showing off his bandaged limb with clear pride. They are telling us about their day, Huntmaster translated, amusement coloring his voice. About the human who played chase the prey, who was fast but not fast enough, who made the room smell like pack den and let them sleep on her comfort cloth. Comfort cloth, Lila echoed. Is that what? The jacket, pack leader clarified. They do not have the vocabulary for jacket yet. So, comfort cloth, something that smells like safe person and makes good sleeping place. She paused, scales shifting through complex patterns. Prowlkit says you are pack friend. Snapjaw agrees, but insists you need better climbing skills. Talonpip says you fixed his hurt, and therefore you are pack parent now. Lila's brain short-circuited somewhere around pack parent. I'm... what? It is the highest compliment a cub can give, Huntmaster said. To claim someone as pack parent is to trust them completely, to accept them as guardian and protector. His scales darkened slightly. It is not something Narlith cubs typically extend to other species. In fact, I know of no recorded instances. Oh, Lila said, faintly. That's... wow. I'm honored? You should be. Pack leader crouched down, bringing herself closer to Lila's height, which somehow made her more intimidating rather than less. Tell me, human, why did you volunteer to handle my cubs when 3 other caregivers had already failed? Lila thought about lying, about giving some professional answer about duty and training and problem-solving. But something in pack leader's eyes told her that dishonesty would be detected immediately and judged harshly. Because they reminded me of kids back home, she admitted. Human kids who get labeled as difficult or problem children just because they have more energy than the system knows how to handle. They're not bad kids. They're just intense. And nobody was treating your cubs like kids. They were treating them like dangerous animals that needed to be contained. They are dangerous, Huntmaster pointed out. Their claws can tear through standard protective gear. Their bite force can crack bone. At 3 cycles, they are already capable hunters. They're also 3 cycles old, Lila countered. They're babies. Babies who happen to have claws and teeth and hunting instincts, sure, but still babies. They need play and structure and someone who isn't terrified of them. Fear makes them push harder. It's predator instinct. If something fears you, you're either bigger than it or it's hiding weakness. Either way, you investigate. And you were not afraid. Oh, I was absolutely afraid. Lila laughed, the sound slightly unhinged. I was terrified. Still am, a little. But I didn't let them see it. I respected what they are. Apex predators, hunters, strong and fast and dangerous, but I also saw what else they are. Curious, playful, desperate for someone to engage with them properly instead of just trying to suppress their instincts. Pack leader stood, reaching down to scoop up Talonpip, who chirped happily and curled against her chest. The station director wants to remove our cubs from the nursery program. Says they are too disruptive, too aggressive for integrated childcare. Lila's heart sank. That's not fair. They're not aggressive. They're just, we agree. Huntmaster gathered Prowlkit and Snapjaw, 1 cub in each arm, looking completely natural despite their squirming. Which is why we are requesting that you be assigned as their primary caretaker. Exclusively. Lila blinked. Exclusively. The other children fear my cubs, Pack leader said bluntly. This is not ideal for socialization, but it is reality. If our children must be separated from the general nursery population, we want them with someone who understands them, someone they have claimed as Pack. I'm not sure I'm qualified for that. I've only been here 6 months, and— You got them to nap. Olmara's voice cut through the calm, startling Lila. She'd forgotten the entire observation deck was probably still watching. You played with them for over an hour without injury. You treated Talonpip's wound and earned their trust. You're more qualified than anyone else we have. Pack leader's scales shifted to an approving blue. The Killmoth speaks wisdom. You have proven yourself capable. The question is, are you willing? Lila looked at the 3 cubs, now cradled in their parents' arms, but still watching her with bright, curious eyes. Prowlkit chirped hopefully. Snapjaw's tail waved in what might have been encouragement. Talonpip reached toward her with his good forelimb, making grabbing motions. 3 tiny apex predators who'd decided she was Pack, who trusted her, who'd slept peacefully on her jacket because it smelled like safety. Yes, Lila said, surprised by how certain she sounded. Yes, I'm willing. I'll do it. Good. Huntmaster shifted his grip on the cubs, preparing to leave. We will inform the director. Expect new contracts and assignments by tomorrow. And Lila? His scales darkened seriously. Thank you for seeing our children as children, for not giving up on them. For being Pack friend, Pack leader added. She reached out 1 clawed hand, slowly, carefully, and placed it on Lila's shoulder. It was heavy, warm, and absolutely terrifying. We do not forget those who protect our young. You are Pack friend now. This is not a temporary designation. They left then, cubs and parents, a family unit heading home after a long day. But before they reached the door, Prowlkit squirmed in his father's grip and called back to Lila. A series of clicks and chirps that she couldn't understand, but somehow knew meant, see you tomorrow. "See you tomorrow," she called back, and meant it. The door closed. The observation deck erupted in noise. Cheering, probably, or possibly shocked commentary. Olmara was saying something through the comm about paperwork and contracts and hazard pay increases. But Lila just stood there in the middle of Playroom C, surrounded by overturned furniture and the lingering scent of 3 sleeping cubs, and started to laugh. It bubbled up from somewhere deep in her chest, slightly hysterical, completely genuine. She'd come to Little Nebula Station thinking, how hard could alien daycare be? Turns out, when you're adopted by apex predators who think you're pack, pretty damn hard. And absolutely, completely worth it.